And Neil Wallis is with me now for his first television interview. How much did this ruin your life?
Well, I'm not going to let it ruin my life, but it came damn close. And if it had anything to do with those people who were mentioned earlier in your piece there, they didn't care either way whether it ruined my life or not.
You think this was a politically driven thing?
I know it was a politically driven thing, yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, when I was arrested, amongst the very first questions they asked me was about what I had to do with the hacking of Millie Dowler's phone. Some very basic detective work, like looking at Google maybe, would have told them I didn't work for the paper then. They arrested me because they needed a trophy. This was the days when all the scandals was exploding, and it was driven, and what followed has been driven by those political considerations which made Keir Starmer pursue me like this.
You can see why, though, can't you? I mean, if hacking was going on...
No, not really, no.
...on an industrial scale, and several journalists now have been convicted, so we know it was going on, you were the deputy in charge, you can see why they would say, well, we've got to find out what he knew.
Yeah, but do you not think that they needed to find some evidence before they could wreck my life for 4 years? Are we really at a situation where an unholy alliance of the police desperate to resurrect their own reputation, the CPS driven by a now Labour MP, politicians who hated Murdoch, and all of those things came together in an unholy alliance? They wanted a trophy and they didn't care what they get. They arrested 26 News of the World journalists, of which I'm simply the latest victim. Of those, one jury verdict convicted somebody of being guilty. 6, all doing the same sort of job, were convicted. Not convicted, they pleaded guilty. But that left 19 people whose lives have been devastated in the same way that I have. And it doesn't just finish with me. How many of the Sun journalists who were arrested and pursued as part of this? 2 friends of mine are still facing trial. They were in a trial that cost £6 million. There were 26 charges against them. Jamie Pyatt and Chris Farrow. Those guys are now facing a complete retrial at the Old Bailey. It's going to last a month. It's going to cost another hundreds of thousands of pounds. And for what? 24 of the 26 charges are being thrown away. It is driven by an agenda.
So you blame the police, the Crown Prosecution Service. How much do you blame Rupert Murdoch for leaving you out to dry, if you like?
I'm not at all happy that those colleagues of mine, like myself, at the News of the World, I've had to pay for my own defence, right? It's cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to save my good name. It would have been easier to plead guilty. I think I've said that here before. It would have been easier and less painful for me to have pleaded guilty. I was not going to do that. Other colleagues of mine have had far worse times than me, but it has cost my family's life savings.
So why were you treated so differently to someone like Rebekah Brooks?
You're
both cleared. She's looked after. People are talking about her getting another big job.
Yeah, well, you'll have to ask them about that. I'm not interested really in having pops at people like that. The people who put me in that courtroom were not Rupert Murdoch. They were the CPS and the police, and the chief prosecutor stood up and basically said, my case is that he must have known. And we have some oblique evidence that we will show it's true.
Can you see
12 good men and true listened to that for a month and threw it out.
Well, what do you think that means? Do you think that means that in case after case where there have been acquittals, not just on hacking, but on payments as well,
yes,
that the public, in the form of the juries, just don't think any of this was as serious as we were, all led up the path?
You've just raised a third thing. The first thing was that jury who considered, I went through 25,000 documents as I was preparing myself for this case. This jury went through document after document, considered them all and threw it out. So the first thing is, Krishnan, I'm innocent, right? And that jury knew it. The second thing is that I think you make a very good point, is that so many case after case after case, the juries have looked at this and thought, what is this about? And finally, I think that during my trial, the judge made the point, this was a very serious offence. I was sitting in a dock where murderers have sat, where terrorists have sat, where rapists have sat, and I'm afraid what happened was appalling, but it was not as serious as that. How much have they spent? £40 million, 145 detectives on this, not catching paedophiles.
Neil Wallis, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.